Welcome to CyberMAYnia, cyber talks with the brightest minds in cybersecurity. Discussing risks, AI, emerging threats, workforce challenges, and more. Brought to you by Cyber Range Solutions. With your host, May Brooks.
Hello and welcome to another episode of CyberMAYnia. With me today is Joseph Carson. Joseph, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Many thanks for having me on this show today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So without further ado, like I always do on these podcasts, tell us a little bit about you, about your journey, what drew you to the cybersecurity world.
Absolutely. I mean, my journey's been quite a long one. The gray hairs are kind of like, showing. So it shows that I've got a lot of war wounds and experiences. But I've been in the industry close to, in IT in general, it's close to 30 years. So I started way back in 1993, 1991. That was kind of where I was getting into system administration and IT and help desk and all of those things, data analysts. And throughout those first 10 years of my career was working on things like hospitals, medical records, digitalization of hospitals and GPs. I worked in things like ambulance service. So when you're looking at critical systems, that when those systems aren't working and are not providing the services, people died. So that was for me, you really get to understand about the critical nature of the services you provide. But it was around 2001 that was my transition into cybersecurity. It was kind of a shift in my career. 2001, the company I was working for at the time, we were one of the world's largest financial and foreign exchange and money markets systems. And we became a secondary victim to a DDoS attack. And that DDoS attack was known as the grc.com DDoS attack. So Steve Gibson, we all know Steve Gibson, security. He does his security podcasts, well-known research in the industry. His company became a primary victim of a DDoS attack. And we just happened to be using the same ISP services that he did. And we became a secondary victim. So I worked on mitigations and failovers and changing ISPs and getting our services back up and running. But that incident became very interesting for me. So I did a very deep analysis into it. And that DDoS attack itself was where I decided to switch from being a system administrator, or at the time I was a network operations center administrator. So I was designing NOCs, and decided to switch my career into focusing more on security. So I switched into a company that was Altiris at the time, that focused on systems management, that had solutions such as patch management, vulnerability assessment side of things. And that kind of was my kind of switch into the security side of things. And I've been dedicating the last 20 plus years of that in security, hopefully making the world a safer place. So a lot of what I do these days is doing a third of my work is on the security research side. So I'm working for a company called Delinea that was formerly brought together from Thycotic and Centrify. So I've been with the company through acquisitions for now over 8 years. And for that, what my role is I'm a security scientist. So a large part of my research is around understanding attack techniques, the attack paths, reverse engineering different types of attacks, understanding the mind of attackers, their techniques, the tools they use, the methods they use, a lot of the upcoming trends. And from that research, I then convert that into educational content. And that educational content is either through books, white papers, studies, giving educational talks, workshops, through my advisory role with different governments and different critical infrastructures around the world. And then I spend another third of my time giving it back to the industry, which means that I go to speak at lots of events. So I do call for papers, and I speak at different events around the world. So in the last couple of years, I've been a top-rated speaker at RSA, and also my talks have been top-rated talks at IC2 Congress as well. So it's always great that I get the opportunity to go and share my experiences in research with the industry. And I've done that for quite a long time now. So I'm just hoping that what I do is making a difference. So it's always hard to get the feedback sometimes.
That's true.
It's a lot of outward work, but the feedback that I do get is always quite positive. And I'm happy to keep doing what I do, and I enjoy it very much.
That's amazing. And I absolutely love what you just said. I love the fact that you spend like a third of your time researching, a third of your time publishing and educating, and a third giving back to community. And I absolutely love that. And you make a difference. You know that. And
I
if
like
not,
to
I'm
think
telling
I
you,
do. I like to think I
yeah.
do. And it's not always, when I talk about a third, it's not always that clear cut. Sometimes you're
Oh, no.
juggling many things at once. Recently I just completed 2 pieces of research on ransomware trends, and another one on the future of passwords and passwordless. But it's always juggling many things at the same time. I might be flying to a talk, and at the same time I'm finishing up a piece of research. At the same time I'm trying to figure out what's the 3 time zones I need to be in to do a webinar. so it's not always like, one day I'll spend on this and the next day I'll spend on that. You're always doing everything at the same time. So it's constant prioritization.
I think that in cybersecurity, if you didn't have ADHD coming in, you'll definitely have it coming out, like, definitely.
Yeah.
By the way, I was actually recently diagnosed with ADHD, like, officially. I mean, I knew I had ADHD for probably 20 years, but I think over the years in cybersecurity, it deteriorated. It could also know that. Yeah, because you're doing so many different things, but you either love it or hate it.
Absolutely. I think I actually, there's a lot of people getting diagnosed later with ADHD, and there's different variants of it as well. And so I think it's important, it's good that you get diagnosed, because then you find out kind of what things you can do better and what things you can't do. Some of that might be times a day that you work. A lot of people, struggle with different times, whether it be morning and afternoons. And as you understand when you get properly diagnosed, is that then you can find out what works best for you. I recently had Klaus, who basically was also diagnosed recent years, on my podcast, that basically went through his experience. And it's always important to get diversity, and when you find that, it's great to then look at how you can use that to your advantage as well.
Absolutely. For many years, I always called it my superpower, especially the H part, because I don't get tired. Honestly, I don't get tired. It's now 4:20 on a Friday afternoon, and I'm super excited about doing other things and researching, and probably after dinner, having everyone here for dinner, I'll probably go back to the computer and research some more and work on my doctorate. And I love that. But again, having the diagnosis and thinking about what's suitable for me. And do I always work at night because I'm actually more effective at night, or do I get less distracted at night because people are not calling me and there are no notifications of things like that? So I think it is important. But let's go back. You just mentioned 2 researches that I really want to touch upon. And let's start with the easy part. Let's talk about ransomware. I mean, it's been a serious threat for the last, well, it started in 1989, but seriously for the last 10 years or so. Can you share some of the insights from your research, how it impacts organization? How can they better prepare to respond to a cyber attack, to a ransomware attack?
Yeah. So, I mean, the research was very interesting. The results, we've done the research consecutively for a number of years now, and where we find in 2022, the ransomware trends was a bit stagnant. It didn't increase, it didn't decrease. It was kind of like, it remained the same. And a lot of that was, from a lot of the global destabilization and issues was happening around the world, and also sanctions coming into place. So it became more difficult for ransomware kind of victims to pay ransom as well. And we also saw that there was a trend in the victims of ransomware shifting from Western countries to, for example, Central America, South America, to Africa, countries where sanctions weren't in place, the security defenses were not in place, and their offensive capabilities were not as strong, and they started becoming victims. So we saw places like Costa Rica, Ecuador, Mexico, all having serious impacts of ransomware during that time. But last year was interesting, where we actually now see ransomware kind of finding its legs again, and on the rise and impacting lots of organizations. But one of the techniques that really kind of increased was around data exfiltration, and the attackers are now looking for more stealthier capabilities rather than the more traditional, noisy, destructive, bring your business to a standstill, then threaten to disclose your data, and then if you don't pay the ransom, you don't get the decryption key back. We've seen the attackers move to a bit more stealthy, more, let's say, less business disruptive techniques. Those still do occur. There is the ransomware gangs that have those destructive ransomware, but there's also a lot of them where it's all about just exfiltrating the data and doing extortion techniques and not impacting the business. And it means that those types of victims are more willing to work with the ransomware gangs because they didn't stop the business. And they can also make it much bit more, let's say, non-public, less visible to the media. So that's the type of techniques we're seeing on the increase. So data exfiltration is becoming the more dominant type of technique for ransomware extortion in the last year. We've also seen an increase in victims paying the ransom as well. So doing a lot of negotiations. I've seen ransom demands, getting where they negotiate, and there's lots of negotiators out there that's been able to get it down to maybe 50%, of the price. So that's becoming a big topic, and that's also influenced a bit from things like cyber insurance as well, is also having an impact on those decisions. Because in the cyber insurance, it might have terms around, for example, they say that the insurance company becomes the decision maker for data recovery. And if you sign that in the policy, and you might think, oh, data recovery means one thing, in our industry it means one thing, that you're going to recover from a backup. But in the ransomware and the cyber insurance eyes and opinions, it's actually getting the decryption key and recovering it back. So they consider actually paying the ransom as one of those data recovery options. And if you're signing the policy, you might be giving them control over that decision making. And that might be, from an insurance perspective, the most cheaper option that you have. So from a financial safety net, paying the ransom becomes a more lucrative decision, because that might be covered in the ransom or in cyber insurance policy type of thing. So that's an area that is on the is how the influence of cyber insurance is having on ransomware incidents and cases, and more victims are considering paying the ransom itself. We've also seen a trend where basically the variants of ransomware is changing code bases, where it's moving to more things like Rust and Go, which means that it becomes multi-platform and more mobile. So it can impact more mobile devices, it can impact more IoT devices, more industrial controls. So we're starting to see that slowly evolution happening. With the code bases, it means that it's multi-platform, not just impacting Windows and Linux and Mac OS, but any proprietary operating system it can run code. So that's another major trend. So ransomware is going to be still top of mind for many organizations.
Yeah, probably. I want to ask you about that. Yep. There was recently, about a couple of months ago, it was published that a ransomware group attacked a company in California, if memory serves, and when they didn't pay, they basically reported it to the SEC.
The SEC, yes.
Which was like, honestly, it was. Yeah. Have you seen more events like that where they try to go to the regulators or to law enforcement and tell on you?
Yep, so that's where it's been common practice, where basically if negotiations break down between the victim and the attacker, the attackers are looking at ways in order to put pressure on the organization. So in recent years, of course, GDPR has been one of those, regulations that allowed them to expose that. So if the organization didn't follow security best practices or have the right access controls, or they didn't report it to the Data Protection Authority within 72 hours, then the attackers would abuse that misuse or failure in order to threaten them. If they don't comply with a ransom payment, they will disclose that publicly. So historically, that's been mostly just doxing in the public web, whether on social media, whether on different platforms. But now what's happening is that, of course, the SEC have put into a new rule that came into effect in December. That new rule meant that if you have a material impact to your business, that you have to disclose to the SEC that actually impact that you've had. And when we talk about material impact, of course, when the SEC is always looking at basically publicly traded companies and investors and people who's investing in organizations, is that what they're interested in is when material impact means that there's a financial impact potentially to your valuation of company. And that's what they're looking at. So organizations who may have put let's say a lump sum, maybe a cyber captive, that might protect them from being able to need to do, because that's a money that they can go to in order to help deal with incidents. But if they don't, and they have to go to the money that's actually creating the valuation of the company, which creates a material impact, they now have to disclose that to the SEC. And we've seen organizations in the last couple of months, we've seen organizations now disclosing incidents as a result of this. So organizations, I think HPE were one that actually had to disclose, and they had one that was basically about an incident that they'd experienced. And of course, now there's another one that basically the attackers reported it directly, saying, "Do you know that organization?
By the way, we attacked. Yeah,
this organization has failed to disclose their incident to you, even though we've been communicating."
It's cheeky.
It is,
Honestly.
and it's a. I mean, we have to expect this. This is expectations is that attackers are very intelligent. They're very basically they think of things that outside the box. They don't have the rules that we have to adhere to. So they're going to go to techniques. Is that if they're not going to make money, they want to basically punish you in other ways. And
they want to show what will happen to the next organization if I don't want to be.
It sets that expectation. Now you're like, either.
Okay, so I don't have.
Then,
So even if they don't have that important of information, and I'm not that concerned with my reputation, I might be that concerned with my regulator finding me for it. Yes. So I think, well, again, you said it's yourself. They don't adhere to the same ethical codes that we do. They can do whatever they want. And I think that's exactly the hacker point of view that every cybersecurity professional, in my eyes, should adopt, or at least try to adopt.
Absolutely. The attacker mindset is one thing that we've talked about for many years. Different security researchers have always been portraying that, you need to think like an attacker. And that's where you get into the red teaming and purple teaming, all helps you through that mindset. I think organizations should at least go through those types of experiences to have an experience like that, to get to see how that mindset is and how it allows them to think outside the box, the things that you may not think about. And that's also the SEC rule also makes that incident response has to change. Organizations that have incident response plans, you now need to think about is a lot of incident response plans is about, digital forensics, evidence gathering, containment, recovery, lessons learned, the response. Now you have to have a financial analyst in your team to actually now determine, does this incident have a material impact in your organization? And you need to then do the SEC disclosure filing. So it really will impact incident response going forward to having even financial people as a part of that team that's going to analyze cost and business impact and material impact. So it's going to definitely change. And attacker techniques, this kind of case where the attackers have disclosed it and reported it to the SEC, is we have to now build that scenario into business response plans.
Absolutely. I think that's part of the maturity of our industry going forward, that maybe not all levels of cybersecurity professionals, but at least most of them will need that business understanding. What is this organization doing? How is it doing it? Where are we generating money from? Who are our competitors? So they will understand, even incident responders, even everyone basically understands the actual impact, because the impact on a healthcare provider is not the same like a cryptocurrency exchange. It's not the same industry. It's not the same customers. It's not the same impact. So I think that's definitely something we have to take into consideration.
Correct. And there's types of there's a separation between incidents that have a impact on data that's unchangeable, it's permanent for life. And that's one thing is, versus financial information, which can be changed. You can change your credit card. You can change certain data. I always look back at the one in the Vastamo case in Finland, which was the psychiatrist records, that was disclosed. Those things that are, personal things that, you don't even tell your family, your partner, those are personal details that you've, had conversation with that you don't expect to ever go public. And those cases, when it does, that's, those are the types of cases that, have long-term impacts and even can have life-threatening impacts. And we have to look at those, what's the overall risk of this type of data that's being, stored and maintained? What types of controls are in place? And if it does fail, if those controls fail, what is implications of this data being public? And we can't treat, that's one thing that I always go back in GDPR that I wish I could have had more influence on was, we talk about personal identifiable information, but I always think that we should have actually had that separated between personal information, which is, persistent, and personal identifiable information, which is changeable. I always feel that we should have had that distinction separation
Yeah.
between those two, because the impact, we bundle it into one PII. It's personal identifiable information, which means that yes, your password hash is in the same lines as your home address and your preferences in regards to health and everything else. So when you get it on, but they're not the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned a little bit about your work with global and government agencies throughout the years, and I want to tap on that, since we see a lot of global, let's call it conflicts. I'll be very
Yes.
politically correct, but in the last few years, we see an increase in those global conflicts on the one hand side, and we see on the other hand side a lot of international cooperation and policy shaping across regions. And as someone who's been involved in quite a few of these projects, what's your perspective of what's going on in cybersecurity right now with everything going on around the world?
It is very concerning in a lot of the conflicts around the world, because it does raise that, destabilization in what we're doing. We want the world to be a safe place that everyone can live happily and do the things that they want to do. And ultimately, these conflicts, they don't help with that, and they just go against what human nature should be about. And unfortunately, with that, it also is that there's these separations and let's say changes in cooperation around the world. When we look at cyber perspective, is that no country can do this alone anymore. That's clear. No country can go and have a independent national only cybersecurity strategy, which means we all have to work together. In cyberspace, there is no borders, there is no boundaries. We can try to put up false boundaries, we can try to put up controls where we possibly can, but we have to realize that there is no borders in cyberspace. And that means we have, as countries around the world, need to have transparency and cooperation and provide less safe havens for cyber criminals to operate. And that's ultimately is where we have some countries around the world who are providing those safe havens where those criminals can operate from. So as long as they're not attacking their own citizens and attacking other citizens, that's okay. But it's not. And this means that we have to hold those countries accountable. And that's what we've seen a lot of countries coming together. We've heard about the Geneva Convention type of scenario for cyber. We've had the Talon Papers, which was done a number of years ago, which was an attempt at a Geneva Convention of human rights. And when it comes to cyberspace, we saw cyberspace been added to the NATO as the fifth, basically pillar. And now it means that we're seeing more and more countries cooperating. And I think that's the right way to go. We have to find and make sure that countries who are providing safe havens for cyber criminals to attack on others have to be held accountable. And this means we can only do that from a policy and governmental perspective. And this is something that I think is important, something that we all have to work. Me as a technical researcher side, I can provide the mechanisms in order to identify and provide attribution and have high confidence of where those operators are working for. But we have to leave it to government politicians and government agencies to make sure that they put the frameworks in place in order to make sure that those countries who are providing safe havens, that it becomes a less attractive for them. And it means that there is consequences. And this is something that I think is going forward. We recently saw in Estonia, they also signed and announced the Talon mechanism right now, which is a conjunction of several countries working together. And this is to support Ukraine when it comes to a cyber operations perspective and a cyber defense. Because right now, unfortunately, is that there's every day there's cyber attacks happening over and over and over again, and rather than just sending basically let's say organized support, the Talon mechanism is a way to provide much more organized, so Ukraine can list what their needs are, and then the Talon mechanism through basically government partners and also industry can work together to make sure that those needs are fulfilled. So that's one of the things we're seeing. And I think it's important that, that around the world that, countries who are struggling with cyber capabilities, that we provide support for them. As I mentioned earlier, we saw that shift in victims from Western countries to countries who have less capabilities, such as South America and Africa, that they needed support. And that also saw a lot of initiatives that actually, I think it was last year, where Costa Rica now have a cyber center that's created, and competency center, in order to increase the skills in that region. So these are great things that, unfortunately it's reactive to the scenarios, but it is great seeing the initiatives that actually, help make sure that it's preventative for the future. So this is something that we have to provide countries where they don't have those capabilities, and to make sure that they're ready. And it also means that Africa could be a massive place where if we don't start now, could be again a rising place for cybercrime and cyber safe havens and victims.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with what you said about supporting other parts of the world. And we see that the shortage in cybersecurity is global. We know, according to the 2023 ISC2 workforce study, we're talking today about a shortage of 5.5 million people. No, I'm not going to offer all my ideas for solutions for that. There are a lot of ideas. Some of them are good. Some of them I'm sure are terrible. But one thing that popped into my mind when you talked about supporting each other and governments and everything, I think it's more than just governments. I think it's the cybersecurity community. And I always think that working together makes us better cybersecurity professionals. I feel very privileged now to be in the UAE, which is such a global place with people from all over the world, because someone will share their experience from Costa Rica, and I will share my experience from Israel, and someone else will share their experience from France or from the US or wherever. And we get such a better global understanding of what's going on trends and everything. And I know that you've been very much involved in community and networking events throughout the years. And I would love to hear your perspective about how the community could engage together to make the world a better place.
I think that's a very important topic, and hopefully something that we can address. We do have in the industry, we have a great community, but we also have some issues around brand and let's say image problems that in our industry and social media can be a bit of a let's say a cesspit in regards to some it has its good things and its bad things. Is that for this side of things is that we have to make sure that we try to change that, and we have to make our industry much more attractive for new talent. We have to make it much easier for them to get into the industry. And sometimes we put up too many barriers. We put up too much, separation, and we have to start thinking about that. We have to accept diversity. We have to allow people from different backgrounds. We have to look for people with different skill sets who's even changing, let's say careers and trades, maybe even later, and as they might be in their 40s and 50s, and they might decide that they want a career change. Maybe they've been doing something that's been physically hard, and they can no longer do that anymore because of that toll on their body. But cyber, you can work in cyber with your mind, and I think that's really where we have to start, being more welcoming to new ideas and people from different backgrounds and different experiences. And that's one of the things that I was thinking is we have a bit of a challenge with that. What I try to do in the industry is I've tried to make sure is being inclusive as possible, and making sure that where people want to get in is helping them see that cybersecurity is such a massive industry. It's not just one area. It's not just about working with computers. It's not just about working with technology, but there's many different fields, from basically where you might have a mathematical background, and cryptography might be something that's more suited to those types of skills. You might have a social background, and then communication and cyber and messaging might be a good skill. You might have basically an engineering background, and maybe reverse engineering might be a good area to get into. We have such a big area of different specialists and expertise of needs, and we have to make sure that people understand that there's such great areas, and that you can continually evolve and adapt your skills and learn. It's a continuous learning opportunity as well. I have not stopped learning the entire time I'm in this industry, and if I do stop learning, then I'm going to become redundant very quickly. So for me, it's always about I had to allocate a good amount of my time for self-learning as well. One of the things is when I mentioned earlier about my education material and giving back, I try to share my expertise where possible. So even where new people is getting in the industry, I've done a lot around things like hacking gamification. So I hold monthly meetups where people that's literally just first time in the industry are getting to see all the possibilities that's available for them. Some of them are actually students that's still studying at university. Some of them are changing careers, and they're looking to get to retrain in the industry. And through gamification, really gives them that understanding about all the different areas that they can get into, and showing it from an attacker's perspective, showing it from the reverse engineering, showing it from the possibilities, and making it entertaining and fun as well.
You are.
Because sometimes from when we look at our industry from a media perspective, it's a scary industry. It's always fear. There's always bad things happening. And sometimes we have to stop and think about, we have to stop and enjoy the successes. We have to take a pause and look at and make it fun. And a lot of the things I do in the community is my attempt to do that. My attempt to bring joy into what we do, showing that yes, while there might be the scary things that can happen, but there's things that we can do to make the world a safer place. Because ultimately, it's interesting when we think of ourselves. Many of us, you and me, we all think of ourselves like superheroes in our own superhero story. And we may not be wearing a cape. Our super skill is our knowledge in technology, and we're here to make the world a safer. My ultimate goal is to make the world a safer place online for everyone, and I try to achieve that every day, and by sharing my knowledge in the community, because I know I'm an aging person, and that over time, that I need to make sure that I hand that, that flag, and I hand that, flame to the next generation that's coming through, and making sure that they can continue with it. So that's why I spend quite a large portion of my time working with the community, working in the industry, doing webinars, doing my podcast talks, doing basically talking at different conferences, being a mentor for students that's doing their thesis at university. It's all about bringing people together, and bringing the knowledge and making sure that knowledge is not lost and it's developed and continued.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? You touched upon the future. So I want to ask you, as someone who's researching current events and the future events, where do you see this industry going in the next, 5-10 years, especially around evolving threats?
Absolutely. I mean, if I had that magic wand of predicting the future,
we'll all have a great startup right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I do, foresee some things, and usually, they do come to reality. And I think right now, of course, we've got a lot of hype around generative AI, and what's happening is that the time to evolution is reducing. So that evolution time is reducing down. What I mean by that is that the time between campaigns, the time between technology advances, is significantly reducing. So, for example, an attacker, let's say, who's doing an offensive campaign, they might have a campaign that is launched, and then over time they will get feedback from that campaign, and then they will augment it, build it into the next generation of that, variant of code or malware or ransomware, put evasion techniques that they've learned since then, and then basically relaunch that again as a new campaign. And that might take 6 months. It might take a year. Now, what's happening is using a lot of automation and AI and augmentation and art, all of those together. What's happening is they can now do that in real time. Is that the time between campaigns is going to significantly reduce, and that can be then augmented in real time, where they learn. A defender has learned a technique and now is defending and putting indicators of compromise and preventing them. That can be fed back, and in real time, the code can be augmented, recompiled, and included in the current campaign. So the time to that, basically, let's say dwell time, is significantly reducing. And again, the same thing with the defenders is that we're using that same techniques in the defensive tools. So what's happening is that we're learning from those techniques, we're building them into defenses, we're augmenting our defenses in real time, dynamic, adaptive. I would say it's almost like, where security is becoming almost like a living organism, and all of the lessons we're learning around the world is coming into that, and the intelligence collectively is going to continue, stopping attacks and learning as quickly as we possibly can. So that learning cycle is speeding up, and it's going to become the battle of algorithms. Ultimately, we're going to start seeing is that whoever has the better algorithm is going to be always that one step ahead.
More processing power.
More processing power, which means more energy consumption, which ultimately means that the moment you make a mistake in that algorithm, that's when bad things happen. So, because algorithms at the end of the day is, when we talk about AI, we sometimes think of it, it's on its own, it's doing it itself. But behind the AI is people. The humans are working on it. So they're changing the code, they're creating the algorithms, they're making the modifications. So behind the algorithm is a human. So when it comes down to, again, accountability and responsibility, it's going to be, humans are going to be basically the ones that's making the difference at the end of the day. We can set things off that will be augmenting and automated and doing things independently. But yes, humans will be critical. And this is where I do see a massive trend in responsibility for algorithm developers and algorithm maintainers and algorithm protectors. So we will no longer, in the past, we've been responsible for, securing IT systems, computer systems. And then we've shifted to, securing and maintaining and protecting data. To then, one of the things Miko said recently was, we're now no longer protecting data, we're protecting society. And included as part of that will be protecting algorithms. So we're basically always continually augmenting and shifting the thing that we're protecting, because some of those things can be dangerous if abused. So the next 10 years, I think it's going to be the battle of algorithms, and the computational power that's behind that is going to be where we're going to see a massive shift. So if you're an algorithm developer, you've got large amount of responsibility to make sure that you get it right.
Absolutely. You talked about the end users, and I want to go back to something you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation. You talked about your recent research, and I want to talk about passwords.
Yes, we
and
all love and hate them.
I'm not going to say, I'm not even going to say my opinion about passwords, but you know what? I do want to hear from you. You talked about passwords, password management, no passwords. Where do you see us going in as an industry? How can we actually support our users if we're talking about a safer world?
From users' perspective, is that we really need to start, passwords are probably one of the biggest causes of cyber fatigue and cost to users. So it's a pain. And what we're going to see is a fundamental shift is we always hear about the term passwordless, but passwordless is a bit of confusing because people think the passwords are disappearing. But what's really happening is that they're shifting in regards to where they're being used. So for me, I think one of the things is that where we can do is the less that we have humans interact with passwords, the better and safer the future of the world will be. But those passwords will be moving into the background. They will be, considered keys and credentials or passkeys and digital wallets. And how the user unlocks those digital wallets and keys and access will be using much more user-friendly or friendly experience. So what we're really doing is we're not moving to a passwordless world. What we're moving to is a passwordless experience. And that's very different. Means that the user, it means that the passwords are being augmented into the background behind the scenes. And what they're able to do is use things like biometrics, multi-factor authentication, let's say one-time tokens, other types of much more user-friendly and better experience mechanisms in order to unlock those secrets or credentials that then get exchanged in the background behind the scenes. So this is really where things like password managers, passkeys, digital wallets, privileged access management solutions all become really important, because what they do is they will be managing the credentials behind the scenes, the security controls that need to be augmented behind the scenes. So really kind of putting passwords in the background and making it much, reducing that friction for users, meaning that they don't have to choose a password. what they do is they have ways of provisioning or accessing using much more user-friendly mechanisms, such as a passwordless experience. So passwords are not going away, and what they are doing is they're behind the scenes. They still need to be managed. They still need to be secured. It might be in the form of a one-time temporary key. It might be in the form of a one-time maybe application password or persistent password that is done from a machine perspective. And we'll move away from managing passwords to managing access. That's where the shift will happen. It's about the access that we manage rather than just managing, objects. So the future, we'll start seeing a lot around things like digital wallets. A digital wallet will be basically where different attributes will be kind of maintained. It might be your financial information. It might be your driver's license. It might be your passport. It might be your credentials. That'll be stored within that wallet. And then there'll be different protections in that wallet, depending on the sensitivity. And those credentials will typically might be in the form of a passkey or a FIDO2 credential. And the FIDO2 credential is simply just a combination of a username and password together to make it a credential that can be exchanged securely. In the background, then what organizations will then focus around is basically entitlement and managing what you can access with those credentials that you have been entitled to. So it really gets into thinking about where the access. It's all about the access side. Identities and credentials are going to be one of those key factors, and it's the new let's say perimeter. It's where basically where organizations will be able to maintain control of, because right now, organizations, the perimeter from a network perspective is the internet. The internet is the perimeter, and you cannot manage the internet. You have to manage what happens through the systems that you can control, and that's the IDPs and the entitlements and access and assets. So that's really where organizations really need to shift their security kind of perimeter to, and try to move the user side to that passwordless experience. But from the machine side, you need to make sure that you have a very solid strategy around how you manage machine passwords, code, keys, credentials, passkeys, service accounts, application accounts, APIs, code accounts. All those will still be behind the scenes, that's keeping the glue together. But augment it and have that as a very important priority and strategy for the business going forward.
Absolutely. What I love about this approach is making things easier for the users, because at the end of the day, we need them to do our job. I mean, I can't do my job as a CISO if I don't have 100% of the organization committed to me. And the easier I will make it for them, the more cooperation I think I can get from them. And when I just put more and more things on them, and you have to change your password every 22 minutes.
Sometimes things are counterproductive. Is that
exactly?
I always say, one of the things is that complexity does not improve security. And that's what we're expecting is we're telling users to create a complex password. And what happens is, and we force them to rotate it every 30 days. And
and then add 2FA on that.
And add different. And what happens is, for the user, they result in choosing the easy path. And they will choose the same password for many accounts. And that's where we see success in recent months in credential stuffing, is because they're reusing passwords because of that complexity enforcement. And they simply just use simple variations of the same password over and over again as well. So what we really need to do is find ways to remove that from the user, is that users should not be expected to be security professionals. They're expected to do their job successfully and be happy and be able to enjoy security. So let's make sure that we actually make security that they want to use. And this is really where you start thinking about that, moving the passwords into the background. Really does that. And I've seen different approaches. I've seen organizations blaming the users for choosing poor passwords. And I'm thinking, but you're the one that sets the password policy. You're the one that tells them what passwords they can choose to use. And then you blame them for choosing what you actually had as set as the policy. Exactly. And really, we need to get to where the point is that it should be a multi-factor authentication by default. but we should be using user-friendly and frictionless types of multiple factor authentications that is much easier for users to use. I'm fortunate enough to be here in Estonia, and this is actually something that's been adopted for the last 20 years in Estonia's digital society, where every user, every citizen here has basically all the government systems and all the financial services, including voting, including opening up a business, all has basically multi-factor authentication by default. And we have digital identities that's basically supported in the back end with the PKI, and every citizen has the ability to use it. And it's built into society here. That's the thing, is that once you make it part of your culture and make it part of society, it makes it become the default. And it can take a long time to get that adoption and get that acceptance. But
the internet is not going anywhere.
We're not going to have a new internet 2.0 anytime soon.
No.
Not in the next 10 years at least. We may have augmented, but I don't think we're fundamentally going to change the core of the internet anytime soon. So it's really important to make sure that we make the best out of it that we can with the tools that we have access to.
Absolutely. Joseph, thank you so much for joining me. Before we wrap this up, we always do a quick pop quiz. First thing that comes to mind, so I have a couple of questions for you. Mm-hmm. So number one, looking back at your very long and very successful career, can you choose a specific moment or moments that really stand up, something that you're really proud of?
There's two moments in my career. One was a realization. The other one was probably more a rewarding success. So the first realization was I'm a perfectionist by nature. So I always like to do things perfect. And one of my former bosses, Brian Honan, said to me many years ago, he said that, Joe, in order for you to excel, you have to be able to share information more. And it was that kind of, since I'm a perfectionist, I was not sharing, and he opened my eyes to sharing information. He opened my eyes to what I could achieve, and that fundamental, comment and let's say he's continued to be a mentor to me for many, many years since, and that changed the way I shared information. It helped me get over my perfectionist by nature and really get to the point where I'm sharing something. This is not quite my final work, but it's work in progress, and it got to where I wasn't afraid to share information anymore, and that has, that alone has prevented many major cyber attacks over the years. By me getting to the point where I'm willing to share information, even though I'm not kind of quite 100% about it, but when people got access to that, it allowed them to make changes to their systems that prevented attacks from their organizations becoming serious victims. So that one thing alone, I think, changed my mindset in how I looked at things. In more recent years, I really came down to where I was kind of asked to write a book, and I wrote a book that was called Cybersecurity for Dummies. And it was one that I've done slight modifications to it, but it's one that even when I read it today, I'm my own biggest critic. I look at myself and I'm going, when I do something, I'd like to fix it or correct it. But when I look back at that book, and the difference it's made, it's had tens of thousands of people have read that book, and it's really it's the book that I was, if I could have a book that I could give to anybody with zero computer knowledge, that they would get value from it. And that was the intention, and it has made a big difference. And as a result of that book, I received the ISC2 Global Achievements Award a few years ago, and so it was an honor to receive that and become the recipient of it. So I think that really kind of was a big, one is something that for me, giving back to the community that knowledge, but also being awarded and recognized for that contribution to the industry.
Amazing. So how do you celebrate your success?
Usually with a glass of wine.
It's been like, this is the theme of every conversation. Every time I ask that, with a glass of wine, with a glass of whiskey.
Wine, and a massive fist bump in the air.
That's pretty good. No,
yes.
That's pretty good.
Sometimes, I do let out a massive roar when it's significant. So those are moments. I think receiving the IC2 award, and last couple of years became OSCP certified as well. That was another big achievement because such difficult things to achieve. And those are moments where I let out a massive roar, jumped up and down, big, fist in the air. And then moments later, we're sitting in the couch with a glass of wine going, not
Pretty
too bad.
good. Yeah, not too bad. I like that.
So,
Amazing.
but we all have to celebrate. We all have to take those moments. So we don't, what's the point?
Absolutely.
It's we all have to recognize, and support other people's success as well is another thing as well. When I see people that's been receiving basically recognition for their achievements, I think it's important for us to celebrate that and support them and recognize it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can you share something that you've recently done that was completely outside your comfort zone?
Outside my comfort zone.
I like challenging people.
Yeah, that's a challenging one. I think the most challenging one was when I went back to my high school to give a talk to the kids. That was probably the most challenging one I've ever done. When I was asked by the headmaster of the school, she said, "I would like you to come to school and give a motivational talk to kids." And I've done hundreds of talks around the world. I've talked to basically presidents. I've talked to leaders of massive organizations. I've done TEDx talks, and I think this is the one when I went into sitting in front of at my old school in front of a bunch of kids who were now looking at me as a mentor. My stress was very high. So
it's so fun.
I think it's been the most probably one that I think that if I look back in all of the times I've given a talk, that was the one that I was probably under the most pressure.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I remember the same week I had the TEDx talk, and I had the same talk in my community, in my village where I used to live. I was more nervous when I gave it to like all my friends and neighbors. I was honestly, I was stressed. Like whatever. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why it's like that.
I don't know why. I mean, I think it was more of the expectations. I was sitting. I think the week before with the different presidents and government leaders, and I'm just like, "Hey, how's it going?"
Exactly.
And completely mellow. But then,
and you go to your school and you melt down.
Standing in front of a bunch of kids, all about, I think it was about the age of 13 and 14, and I'm just like, I have no idea what to say to you. I give them my kind of experience and try to show them that even from those small places where sometimes your future has been really set and it's very difficult for you to get out of those places, that is possible. So that was ultimately my goal was to show them that your future is not set in stone and it's up to what you can make of it. And anything's possible. So that was really kind of where I ultimately give the talk, but the pressure I was under, the stress level was very high.
Absolutely beautiful. I'm trying to think. Now I have two more. Yeah. What one advice you would give people just starting out in this field?
Starting in the field, I mean, that's a great question to ask. And one of the things is, don't be afraid to ask for help. Is always one of the things I will say is that, if I look back on all of the times where I put myself under a lot of pressure, it was because I didn't know where to go or who to ask for help. I tried to do things alone, and sometimes, that can push you a bit more, but I don't recommend it. I recommend where you possibly can reach out, find somebody who can help you, can provide advice, put you in the right path, make your life easier. Don't try to do things like I do, make it as difficult as possible sometimes. I definitely recommend, find a person who can give you good advice, support you, and help you do things quicker and better. So get a mentor would definitely be something I'd recommend. And there's many out there, many professionals that's willing to take on, more kind of people that they would provide direction and support for.
Absolutely. I love that advice. I absolutely love it. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, because I started asking all my guests that, what's the number one skill any cybersecurity professional should have or should nurture?
I think, well, there's a lot of skills that we need to have, to do well. I think one of the things that we could do better at, and one of the things we should probably spend some more time is listening. we sometimes, when we get the opportunity, we do a lot of talking, and me being one of those people, I do a lot of talking. But we do have to spend time listening and understanding. One of the most valuable things I learned, so it was a number of years ago when I was on a pen test. And during that pen test, one of the things that the CISO had asked me to do was go and sit and spend time with the employees. And that moment made me realize is because a lot of times what we're doing is we're telling employees how to do things, what to do, what's secure, what they should be choosing for passwords, what they should be doing, when it comes to clicking on links and all of those things. We're the enforcers when it comes to security, and you have to do it our way. And that made me realize when I actually went and did that task that the CISO asked me to do, and I went and sat with a number of employees, and I just said, I'm going to sit here, you do your job, I'm just going to listen. And anytime it comes across that you have a challenge that might be security related, just, say what's on your mind to me. And that was the most valuable lesson, because what I got to do was I got to listen and understand about what their motivations are, what makes them successful, why it's important for them to do the things that they do. And it really made me realize that we're not here to support technology and make technology just work, but we're here to support the people who use it, and we're here to help them be successful. So I think one of the most important skills we can do much better on, that maybe we haven't prioritized in recent times, is the skill of listening and understanding, and thinking about, well, I don't want to change their job, but I want to do is help them be successful in it.
Beautiful. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today. It was an absolute pleasure having you here on CyberMAYnia, and I hope to see you guys next time.
It's always great to chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you.